What's going on? Dre, you're watching Harrison Family Values, the podcast. We're going right into this. So I consider Ruslan a friend. Him and I have had a chance to meet a couple of times. We, on occasion, will shoot each other text messages, some encouraging notes and stuff like that. If I see a good video, I'll send it over to him. We have a decent rapport, good relationship. I consider him a brother in the Lord. Um, and so me doing this video, you're not, you saw the title, you see the thumbnail. What you're not going to get from me is me dunking on my boy. That's not going to happen. But I do want to address and respond to a video where he debated Nathan from the religion business. That I just wanted to clear up some things so that everybody who's watching this, including those who are part of Ruslan's online community, have some clarity when it comes to teachers and even the education system. Okay, because if you don't know who I am, my name is Dre. I have this YouTube channel, but outside of the YouTube channel, I am an educator. Currently, I'm working as a district administrator, but for years I was a teacher. But even before that, I was a full-time assistant pastor working full-time, salaried at a church for over 10 years. So I was a pastor longer than I've been in education. No, actually, no, it's about the same time I've been in education. But I've always worked in some sort of capacity working with children, families, youth, whatsoever. So I have experienced both as being an ordained minister, serving full-time as an associate pastor at a church, and working as an educator, a teacher in the public school system. So I have some insight here, some real-world experience, and some knowledge in the matter. Now, I understand fully Ruslan's concerns when it comes to public school education. I do, right? It's the masses that dictate what happens in the classroom. It's public school education. That's how it's supposed to be. But when you have when you have a group of people that show up in mass, in droves to school board meetings, looking to change policies, that's going to happen because it's public school and they will do what the people want, at least the majority of the people want, which is why I'm a firm believer that we need Christians in school boards all across the nation. Because if we are upset with the public school system, it's our fault as Christians. It's our fault. We would go so hard for politics, and we will go hard on voting and America First and all that stuff. And we need representation, Christian representation in politics and in government and in local governments. But we don't want them in the public school board system. It's kind of inconsistent. So I firmly believe that if we really want to make the biggest impact as believers in Christ, then we should be a part of those things, even when it comes to public school education. So Ruslan said a couple of things, right, in regards to the conversation that he had here with Nathan that I'm going to respond to, I'm going to react to. Now, let me say this up front. I don't fully agree with Ruslan's take on this. And maybe it's because of my experience. I worked full-time. And there was a staff of five pastors on staff. 3 of us was full-time. And our salaries was made known to the church. Everyone knew how much I made in the church. And not just everyone in the church. Like if you came to the annual board meetings, you knew exactly what I made. Okay. And in this church that I was at, the pastor didn't set his own salary. He had nothing to do with the process. In fact, when the board met to set the salary, it wasn't even in the meeting. All right. It's the board who set the salary. But let's be honest, right? I believe that pastors should get paid at scale to the size and the need of the congregation at a certain level. Do I believe that a pastor who is pastoring a church of 20,000 should earn $1 million a year? Absolutely not. I don't believe that. And the reason why is because if you're a pastor, you're not called to get money based on the amount of people that you are serving as a pastor. All right. You get paid based on what you need to live. And that's how I feel. And I believe that that's consistent with scripture. Okay. church is not a business, despite what people say. At least the biblical church is not a business. In America, it's become a corporation, right? And in this argument that they have here, which is where I think Nathan has a point, it's because in America, it's a corporate entity that doesn't have any oversight from the very corporation that gave them the entity, the government. So churches can pretty much do whatever they want with their finances without oversight from the government. But in America, many people brag on the fact that they are incorporated as a church, which I have my feelings about that. I believe that it's important to do that, but I also believe that the government should have some sort of oversight to make sure that the people at the top are not siphoning money and pillaging from the people that goes to the church. But there was one thing that he said, and I'm going to talk specifically about the teacher thing. But there was something that Nathan said in regards to how churches govern themselves as far as the finances are concerned. And Ruslan says that, there's a board that governs that. I believe that if a pastor appoints the board, then the pastor still has power over the board and there's no accountability there. So pastors need accountability. They do. And even if they don't want to disclose their salary to the people, that's fine. But at least have a board where he's actually accountable to them. And lastly, before I go into the video, is that if anybody, and I know you might disagree, but my perspective is that if anybody is giving money to any cause, even if it's a church, they're giving it tithes, they should have the right to know where the money is going. And we're not talking about like the minuscule stuff like staplers and stuff like that. No, like if there's a budget for administrative stuff, this is the amount of money that we spend on administration. We don't need to know where every single dollar goes as far as, staples and Post-it notes, reams of paper. We don't need to know that. But salaries is important because we want to make sure that the people at the top aren't getting rich off of the donations of the people that attend the church. That's important, and that should be the goal when it comes to accountability. Now, you might not agree. That's perfectly fine. But when it comes to that, I believe that the pastors are accountable to the congregation. Whether if somebody's been tithing, a whole year, and they ask, well, where do my money goes? Where's my money going? If they are demonized for asking that question, then there's a systematic problem with the church, not with the person's heart, but with the church. Why are you hiding where the money of the donors are going? That's my perspective. But nonetheless, I do want to go into this video so I can add some clarity in regards to teachers.
Underpaid or overpaid? Average pastor salary is $58K. Does that include bivocational pastors in the U.S.?
So mind you, when I was a pastor, I was getting paid about $40,000 a year. Now, here's what people don't know. Okay, if you are an ordained pastor, you're allowed to have 50% of your salary non-taxed and considered your housing allowance. Okay, so I didn't make a lot of money, but I was able to live okay because half my salary wasn't taxed and it went directly to my housing allowance. That was 50% of my salary. And how I arranged it was that I asked my church where I was working, because they would cut me a check, a separate check. I would ask them to make it directly to my landlord, because I was renting at the time, so that it was actually going toward my housing allowance. I don't even put the check in my name. Give it directly to my landlord. That's how I did it. But 50% of a pastor's salary. So it begs to the question: if a pastor is making $200,000 a year, right? $100,000 of that is taxable income, and the other $100,000 is non-taxed, which means they get 100% of that salary as a housing allowance. That means that they could afford to live in a house with the mortgage up to $6,000 and the utilities up to $4,000. Okay, so just so that you guys get about $2,000, $3,000, but at least you guys get like a general idea of how pastors' salaries work. Okay.
47% of pastors are bivocational.
Yes. So does that $58,000 salary include those 47% bivocational pastors?
That's the median salary of a pastor. So take off the ones that are on the very bottom, the ones on the top.
No, I understand. But does that include bivocational pastors that have
And I could imagine that to be true, because not pastors don't make a lot of money, despite what people say, unless you have a church of maybe 300 people or more. Then you're going to start making some money. But if you have a very small church, you probably won't be making money, which is why I believe that a pastor's salary should be at scale to the congregation at a certain point.
another job?
It's the average. So some of them might make 50 and do have another job because they need to make more. They
Got you. So that number is a skewed data point, because you used it against you used it against teachers saying, oh, they made 74 grand a year.
Yeah, and they get summers
Teachers
off.
have a full-time job.
And they get summers off.
They don't have it.
So let's address that. Do teachers get the summers off? Do teachers get the summers off? No. Teachers do not get the summers off. Teachers get paid based off, in most districts, based off of 180 days, which is covered in 10 months. Teachers get paid throughout the summer because they take the 10-month salary and they stretch it out for the 12 months. Most teachers choose not to get paid through the 12 months. Okay. Teachers don't get paid usually through the holidays. It's all a part of the contract. So teachers are not getting paid they're not getting paid time off for not working in the summer. They don't get paid for the summer. They get paid for the 10 months. And some school districts either give the teacher the option to select 10 months pay or stretch it out to 12 months. In the district that I taught at before I became a district administrator, you don't have that option. You get paid, your 10-month pay gets stretched out for the 12 months, okay? So teachers do not have summers off. Despite what Ruslan says, teachers do not have the summers off because they're not working for the summer. They're not earning an income. They get paid only because they chose to stretch out their income so that they do get some kind of money or some sort of money in the summer, which means that they get paid less per week if they choose that option, less per pay period if they choose that option. Teachers do not get paid for the summer. Okay, it's not like a summer vacation. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear. Teachers don't get the summers off. Okay.
Second job.
And they get summers off.
Teachers don't get summers off.
Episode 7 in the religion business is about bivocationality.
Okay, and I think that is a great model. Just like I think the home church is a great model. Hey, Nathan, just like I think there's congregational churches that reveal everything to everybody, and I think that could be a model for some people. The pastor that married me and my wife, Southern Baptist pastor. I know you have your own qualms.
I rock with Ruslan on this. He really does make a good point here where he says people have options to attend whatever fellowship they want to attend. If you don't like the way a church is transparent with their finances, which the whole concept that Ruslan shared about transparency, I have questions about, but he's right in the sense that if you don't like this, then there might be a church that has a more of a congregational approach with where the board, where the salaries of everywhere that the money goes, you'll be able to identify where it goes and track where it goes. So you have that option. So, and I think that when people get so wrapped up in what the pastors get paid, I think it's a terrible marker of the church. And truth be told, I see why though, because the people who are most visible when it comes to Christianity in the church are the ones that are fleecing the flock for their money. The ones that are going viral, the ones that are huge, the ones who have mega churches, are the ones that you see out there telling their congregation to keep giving multiple times in the service. So I think we gotta give some grace on both sides, right? But I believe everybody should know, if you're part of the church and you're a member of the church, should know the pastor's salary. It should have some sort of pastors have some sort of accountability. Like, do I believe pastors should be living poor? Absolutely not. No, not at all. But if you are in a smaller church and that's your only job and you got yourself a Range Rover, then I'm going to have questions.
With the Southern Baptist, but they're generally congregational.
Oh, no, I think there's some great people there. Yeah.
And they reveal everything to everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that is a model that works for some churches. And I think other churches don't use that model and because they don't have to and they have their own reasons. And so transparency, again, built on trust and maturity. Not everyone is mature enough to know everything. If you
Well, I'll say this. I'm gonna end it here. I don't agree with that. Transparency is transparency, regardless. Like, if I'm being transparent, right? If I'm being transparent, then I'm being transparent, whether somebody can be trusted or not. So it's if you're only going to be transparent to who you can trust, then it's not really transparency. Being transparent sort of entails always being available to give an account for what it is that you're being held accountable for. So I don't agree with him here, but he does make a good point where he says, if you don't like this model, then go to a church that has that model, right? If at his church, the board knows how much the pastor gets paid, and then which I don't agree, but then when you get to a certain tier or a certain level, then you're able to know all those things. That falls into church elitism. I don't agree with that. But even in the Old Testament, we find that the congregation, the people, right, held the priests accountable when money was mismanaged. And the only reason why they were able to do that is because they had knowledge of what the priest was earning or getting and how they was using the resources within the temple. So, but here's the thing, right? Pastors should certainly get the fair wages of whatever they earn, right? But let's be honest, okay? When it comes to teachers and pastors, and I'm speaking because I have experience working in both capacities, and it's not even close. And I love my pastors, my brothers out there, but pastors do not work as hard, and the load is not as stressful as those that are teachers. And I'm being perfectly honest with you. Okay. This is not a matter of like church. No. I have many pastor friends that, and this is not a knock on them. By no means is it a knock on them, because they spend a lot of time studying and wanting to teach the right doctrine and visiting hospitals and stuff like that. But that doesn't make up the entire day. They have downtime. They're able to just sit and talk, drink coffee and relax, right? Sundays, maybe not so much, but throughout the week, there's downtime. Okay. I know that because I experienced it. I had a lot of downtime during the workday, right? Then I would pray. I would, read the word. I'll even take a nap or two if I got really tired. I'm not going to hold you. I'll be honest with you, right? But as an educator, as a teacher, there is no downtime when you're in the classroom with the students. In fact, if you are being observed in this downtime, your administration will come in and give you an ineffective in some area of one of the domains that you are observed on. There is no downtime, because if there is downtime, then there's idleness. And when students get into stupidness? When there's idle time. So teachers cannot have any downtime. There is no downtime. They are on from the time the students come in the classroom until they go into lunch. And I'll get this. So until they go to lunch, right? And then after that, they get the kids back and they're on. Okay. There is no downtime for teachers in the day when they're with students. You have to always keep them engaged, busy. There is no downtime. There's no games. There's none of that stuff. They are learning, and teachers are not just teaching, but they're making sure that the lessons are differentiated for the different learning types, different learning levels, maybe even different grade levels. Because if you're in a special class or a self-contained class of 12 students, some of those classes might be called what we call bridges, right? Where you have 2 grades or 3 grades, and the teacher must teach 3 levels of the same content, ELA, math. They have to teach 3 grade levels at max. So that's a whole lot of work. And then while you're there in the class, you are assessing every moment of the day while you are teaching. And that's and I'm not even talking about testing, making sure that checking for understanding and making sure that the students understand what's being taught. And if don't understand, then you got to do more to help them understand. Small groups. And then while you're in a small group, you're making sure that the students are still working. And then it's never downtime. And then during the day, teachers are allowed at least 1 prep period, meaning that if you have a teacher that has a class of 30 students, which is likely in the United States when it comes to public school, you have 30 students in a classroom with one teacher, right? They, in that one period per day, have to grade, plan, differentiate, all that stuff. There's absolutely no time in the day for them to do that. So you know where they do that? At home, when they don't get paid. On the weekends, when they don't get paid. Wait. In the summertime, when they don't get paid. You guys think that teachers got it easy because they have the summers off and they have winter breaks and spring break and all that stuff? And I'm going to be honest with you. I thought that too, until I became a teacher. And I was up till midnight, lesson planning, grading, assessing my students and all that stuff, differentiating my lessons. And then waking up at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning to do it all over again. I had Saturdays to myself, but then Sundays after church, I'm right back at it again. Right back at it again. I think we do a terrible disservice to the public and to our students when we think that teachers just, have all this time off. They really don't, because first off, they only get one period a day to prep. Okay? Paid prep. Which means that most of the preparation that they are doing is on their own time when they're not getting paid. Now, am I saying that pastors should not get paid well? Absolutely not. I am saying this, though. We got to stop comparing pastors to teachers because it's very different. Very different. Very different. I will say this, though. I do think, and I say this in love, the pastor's job is more important because it leads people to an eternal relationship with the eternal God. However, as it comes to earthly work, like the actual doing things, teachers got it by far. And I say that with all respect to, one day I plan on, pastoring again one day if the Lord leads. I'm not doing anything until God says it's time. But my heart is to serve people. My heart is to encourage people to godliness, to stay humble. And if you want to get this merch, there's a link in the description down below. But that's my hope. That's my goal, is to be a blessing, to lead people to Christ, and to see those who have been led to Christ to live a godly life that loves God and loves people, service to people, to see others come to know who the Lord is, live a holy life, reflecting God's love and the light of Christ to others in a way that's genuine, humble, and that gives God the honor. That's my hope. That's my goal. But in regards to this conversation, I don't think that teachers and pastors are a good comparison. I don't, especially in a world where many people look at pastors as CEOs and not as shepherds, where pastors are doing more traveling and speaking in different places than they are in meeting with the congregation and developing a good, strong community of believers that hold each other accountable in love and in Christ. They're looked at as CEOs of corporations and not shepherds of a flock in the church. Where teachers, they're working all day with kids to learn something and that get graded on so that they can advance in life and be better human beings. So both very important, but we got to stop comparing the two. All right. And I say that in love. And shout out to Ruslan because he's a friend. I watch every video. And this was a great conversation. It was entertaining. I will say that I don't think that Nathan and Ruslan did a good job listening to one another. And I don't think that Nathan is saying that pastors shouldn't get paid a lot. He's just saying pastors should disclose what they get paid because they're a nonprofit entity in the United States of America. And if they are a nonprofit entity in the United States of America and they incorporate it in the United States of America, which means that they are seen by the government as a corporation, then they should have a level of accountability because, we tend to pick and choose when we want the government involved and when we don't want the government involved. We want to be involved in politics, and they talk about church and state, and it wasn't meant to, that Christians can't be part of the state. It's just that the state shouldn't impose their will on the church, which I agree with. The state should not impose their will on the church. However, if a church is a nonprofit and they're accepting donations from people, who's governing them and making sure that they're not, mismanaging the money? That's the key. That's the goal. And I think that the government should have some level of say to making sure that the money's not being mismanaged. And that's my opinion. You can disagree. You can leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. But that's not to say that my opinion is right and Ruslan and anybody else's is wrong. I just see it differently, because you can have a board of people. Like, I can pastor a church. I can select the board of people that I selected, right? And they're going to do what I tell them to do. Where if this is a corporation and we have bylaws that keeps the pastor accountable, then the board is selected by, it could be by the pastor, but like if I was to plan a church, right, I would have two different boards. An accountability board, which is going to be made up of pastors that are my mentors, that would come together if there's some sort of fault brought against me, that they'll meet, that somebody from the congregation would file a complaint. They would meet to determine, do an audit and do an investigation, determine if what was said about me was true. And if so, they'll set the consequences, and I would submit to that consequence. But as in regards to the day-to-day aspect of the church, we would have a board of people that the congregation votes on with term limits, with terms and term limits. Not really term limits, but term limits, but they can keep going, but they just can't keep serving consecutively. This way, they don't fall in love with me as the pastor and then eventually do whatever I want because they keep getting voted in, right? I don't want that. Like, it's very similar to how politics is done today, where the same people gets voted in over and over again. They don't do anything for the people, but because they're connected politically and they're aligned to a political party and they are loyal to the political party, they'll do whatever it is that the president wants because that's their political party. I wouldn't have that either. So, but again, everybody has their own way of doing things. Ruslan's church does things the way they do it, and it works for them, and God is getting the glory through that. And God will get the glory through another way. But one way that God will not get the glory is if whoever it is that's at the top, which it shouldn't be a top-down approach to church. It should be everybody should be on the same level. Everybody on the same playing field. Whether you're a pastor, deacon, elder, everybody is a child of God. There is nobody more important than anybody else. But if you do have that kind of approach, make sure that the person at the top is not fleecing the flock. They're not doing things immoral or unethical with the finances, like filling their pockets, getting rich, and doing for themselves only. And that's my spiel on this. Okay? Stop comparing teachers to pastors, because the functions and the roles are not the same. And the workload is not the same. Okay. With that being said, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, leave a like down below, hit the like button, and it helps with the YouTube algorithm. And if you think that you disagree or you agree, leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. I appreciate you. And if you'd like to support the channel, you have a couple of ways to support us. Pick up some merch, links down below. And you can go to Amazon.com and search From a Fatherless Father to a Son to pick up my book. I thought I had a copy here in this mess. But you can pick up my book, From a Fatherless Father to a Son. And you can support the channel by hitting the join button down below if you're watching on YouTube. Or you can go to patreon.com/Harrison Family Values. And you can support the channel monthly by being a Patreon member. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate you. And until the next upload or live stream, I'm out. Peace.